When I come to Borrowdale, I'm always struck by that tremendous depth of human history that's evident in the landscape. At its northern extent, we've got the wonderful stone circle of Castle Rig. Close to its heart or centre, near the jaws of Borrowdale, you've got the late prehistoric or Iron Age hill fort at Castle Crag. And you've also got evidence way up high on the tops in the form of Neolithic quarries, where people in the prehistoric period were exploiting a particular type of stone known as Borrowdale tuff. Hard and almost glassy like flint. You could work it, you could make tools out of it, and particularly axes, which they could use for butchery and coppicing and felling trees. Until very recently, that was all that I would have said we had from the prehistoric period. But there's work which is still ongoing, being undertaken by archaeologists working for the National Trust to survey the land that was recently acquired at Thorneythwaite. They've recorded upwards of about 80 sites, but the one behind me is the one that's exciting me most of all. We think this feature is part of a late prehistoric or Romano-British settlement, which would have contained hutments and hut circles inside and would have kept the animals out of the living space in the interior. It's arguably about 2,000 years old and is really exciting evidence of early occupation and agriculture in Borrowdale. Borrowdales abound with place names which have Norse derivation, were probably applied to the landscape from the early part of the 10th century onwards. There are dozens of thwaites in the Lake District and probably approaching a dozen just in this valley alone. Thwaite simply means clearing, and it's a wonderful document of how those Norse settlers were arriving in valleys like Borrowdale and having to fell trees to make clearings for grazing and browsing of animals. Perhaps the most fascinating chapter in the history of Borrowdale took place immediately after the conquest of Cumbria and Carlisle in 1092, as all of the land in this valley was parcelled up to become the new manor of Borrowdale and was gifted to one of the victorious Norman lords who had come over with William the Conqueror. And that really changed in the later 12th, early 13th century. Fountains Abbey, based in Yorkshire, and Furness Abbey, based in the Furness Peninsulas, established cattle farms called vaccaries, and sheep farms and arable farms known as granges. And that way of organising the land probably persisted for 4 or 5 centuries up until the dissolution. And of course we can only begin to imagine how profound that sense of change must have been. And it was a little bit after the Reformation, it was after the 1560s, when the manor of Borrowdale, now a Crown estate, was sold to London entrepreneurs. And these two really appear to have asset stripped the manor of Borrowdale, rather than seeing it and farming it and leasing it as a whole, a harmonious system. They kept the most lucrative and prosperous mineral rights for themselves as a going concern. They sold the woodlands to the highest bidder. They sold some of the mineral rights to the highest bidder. In the early part of the 19th century, with the Napoleonic Wars, the French Wars, and that difficulty with importing, the difficulty of trade with Europe, suddenly there was a danger of people in this country being hungry. So in response to that, farmers were encouraged to bring marginal land back into cultivation, to plough, to drain and to improve. That happened again during and immediately after the Second World War. Again, there was a chance that we couldn't feed our own population. There's often profound social and political changes on the horizon. I think that feels perhaps closer and more acute now than it has done in my lifetime. But traditional farming in the Lake District has always found their way. It's often had to change, but it's always come through. And I certainly feel very confident that whatever happens in the 21st century, it'll come through and we'll still be enjoying this fantastic landscape in decades and centuries to come.